Connie and I are in Waco, Texas, here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Waco. And I was asked the last time we were in Texas by a reporter. He said, you know, I see on your website that you do a lot of Unitarian Universalist churches. Why is that? And I said, because it's the low-hanging fruit. I mean, evolution is, it's the easy pickings when it comes to evolution in terms of Unitarian Universalists, because the Unitarian Universalist Association is already grounded in our best understanding of science. Whereas even the most liberal Christian denominations like the United Church of Christ, the Disciples of Christ, the Episcopal Church, still have enough biblical literalists in their midst that you've got some resistance to kind of the bold teaching of evolution. Throughout this last week, while we've been in Texas here celebrating Charles Darwin's 200th birthday, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is that for me the boldest aspect, the most transformative aspect of the evolutionary story of the universe, and just of a deep time worldview and a deep time emergent worldview in general, is the way that it naturalizes and realizes what we have, I think, so often come to think about merely in a unnatural or a supernatural. This car's going back.
Okay, start over with the realizing.
Where am I?
Something about the realize what we used to think is unnatural.
Yeah. So is the naturalizing.
Wait, start with a complete sentence.
Okay. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about this past week here in Texas as we've been celebrating Charles Darwin's 200th birthday is how an evolutionary worldview realizes or naturalizes what we often think about, liberals and conservatives alike, religious people and non-religious, as unnatural or what's often called supernatural. But what we now realize is that virtually all supposedly supernatural stories are actually pre-naturals, before we could possibly have had a natural understanding. And I think until we lift up the natural and the real, so that it's at least as important, if not more important, than the unnatural and the imaginary, we're never going to be aware. We're never going to be able to know what God's up to today. We're never going to be able to be. We're going to have a trivial notion of God and a trivial notion of religion in general. If religion is identified mostly with the unnatural and the imaginary, and what I mean by unnatural is, okay, think about it. I used to think that the gospel, the good news, was an unnatural father who occasionally engages in unnatural acts, supernatural interventions, who sent his unnatural son to earth in an unnatural way to provide an unnatural salvation from an unnatural curse that was brought about by an unnatural snake. And if you believed in all this unnatural activity, you get to go to an unnatural heaven and avoid an unnatural hell. And it seems to me, I mean, is it any wonder why millions of young people are leaving the church if that's what they're exposed to and that's what they're told the good news is? It's so much more real than that. The gospel is infinitely more real than that, but we can't understand that without an evolutionary worldview. It's only a deep time worldview that realizes the divine, that realizes divine revelation, so that what we think of as divine revelation isn't merely words dictated to somebody in their head 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago, but that every fact discovered by science is a revelation of God. It's a revealing of what's true, what's real. In fact, I've been thinking a lot about this. And I'm going to say it as boldly as I feel it. Every story anywhere in the world that purports to say what God thought, what God said, or what God did, or what God was planning, or anything else, is always and necessarily some person or group of people, what they thought or felt or wished or wanted or feared God thought or did. In other words, if ABC News or CNN was covering the event from to report on the nightly news, there would not be anything miraculous to report other than what was coming out of the mouth of some individual or out of the pen or whatever they wrote with back then. And we trivialize God, we trivialize the gospel. If when we read God said this or did this in ancient texts, as supposing that it's anything other than a human interpretation. It is always, God language is always interpretation. It's never objective fact. It's always subjectively meaningful, but it's never objective fact. And unless we get that, we're going to be clueless as to what God's revealing today and what God's doing today in our midst.